Welcome to the Numinous Factor, the home of spiritual and metaphysical exploration through the guiding lights of Ronnie Mae James, medium, and Claudia Ruland, astrologer. Debate and discussion, observation and openness, stimulation and sensitivity to all matters pertaining to our soul. The Numinous Factor.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Numinous Factor podcast. Our first segment on the Numinous Factor, as always, is Spirits Talking About Spirits. This is where Ronnie and I discuss a particular topic relating to the spiritual and metaphysical realm. Today's topic is there really life after death? Hi Ronnie, how are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you, Claudia.
Hello Brodie, how are you?
Brodie?
It's been a long week.
It's been a long week.
I got haunted
Did you?
Did you?
after Halloween. Yes, actually, but I do have to say that we didn't get any trick-and-treaters. It's an old part of town where we are. There's not many kiddie-winks around here.
I think the skeleton in the noose by the door was a bit of a...
Well, it is a good one. And the fact that I'd mined there were landmines of being sized Achtung meinen might have given it away to the parents. But but there were some kids running around, which is sort of, but it's like Mother's Day and all that sort of stuff. It's sort of developed by the card companies and the lolly companies.
Yeah, the kids
it's very
love it.
different here too, as it would be with you, Ronnie, in UK, but in Canada, Halloween is such a big thing. Kids just literally the month of October becomes the month of Halloween, so it's the 1st, the 2nd, and 3rd of Halloween.
Well, look, I think there's a place for it, but it's there's nothing about, from your show last week. There's no connection anymore between the Americanization of Halloween and the original celebration.
True.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
Yeah, it's
It is
very
a shame.
commercial now, isn't it? And the kids, I know little kids get really excited because they know they're going to dress up, they're going around the houses, and they're going to end up with all these lollies, or sweets as we call them.
Yep.
And I wonder how many mums and dads have sat there for hours digging out the pumpkins that we never had as kids because we didn't grow pumpkins. It was all these big turnips that took probably about 6 months, to dig them out. They're called jack-o'-lanterns, and they were that bloody heavy. After a while,
The concrete of vegetables.
I think it's probably why we didn't have trick and treat, because you couldn't carry the lantern. You got stuck.
So they may have misunderstood. We may have mislaid our connection with Halloween. Have we mislaid our connection with heaven?
Well, we did talk. Yeah, we did talk about that in our last podcast last week about contacting the dead. Do they come back? Do they talk to us? And the big question about, is there really life after death? And we will be covering astral planing after this topic, which will certainly
that's a big one. We've had a few emails about that.
Consolidate, about what actually happens. And it's funny, when Claudia and I went away, because you mentioned in our last week in our podcast that we've been on our little sojourn, which was to go to different spiritual places. I think it's really important, like you were saying, about not taking things off the internet, but actually go to places like for meditation. And we joined a couple of ladies' circles, sacred circles, on our journey to find somewhere we could spiritually plug in. So you can recharge, you can feel good, and then, to go home. And we were actually up near, was it Dalesford, wasn't it? And we stayed overnight in this lovely bed and breakfast in the middle of nowhere, wasn't it?
That was awesome.
That was really cool. And but we won't mention that because we're not advertising for free. Suffice to say, it was a gorgeous place, and we had this meal, and they were gorgeous, these people. They waited on us hand and foot, and it was a 3-course meal, wasn't it?
Beautiful.
And just
lots of love.
Just we were talking, because obviously different cultures we're interested in, what happened to each other when we grew up. And she was starting talking about her brother, I think. It was Tim, is that right?
Yeah.
And we were sat there, and suddenly I heard this lady on my left. She said, "Ask her about Sylvana, Sylvie."
Who?
Sylvana, it sounded like, and then Sylvie. I just ignored her, shoved a spud in my mouth, and carried on.
He was a football player, wasn't Sylvana?
And then she said it again. So I just said to Claudia, "Who is Sylvie? Sylvana?" She said, "Oh, that's my mum,
Yeah, Sylvia.
Sylvia."
Yeah.
So
That's pretty close.
yeah, so there was a message for Claudia about, how pleased she was that she was doing this, and we'd met each other, not her and her mum, but obviously they met at birth, but her birth, not mine. But
Yeah, got it.
ping pong. But she was glad really that we'd formed this friendship. And then shortly after that, on the right side, which is the father's side, the paternal side, I could hear somebody saying Herman the German, and I thought they were joking with me because there's a bit of humour
they knew I would get it.
yeah, there's a bit of humour that goes on from time to time. And I said, "Oh, I've got to ask you this. Who's Herman the German?" And it happened to be your uncle, wasn't it?
Correct.
So I had
Who's also in spirit?
yeah, I hadn't actually known what their names were. I didn't, I knew that Mum was deceased, and she'd passed over, but I didn't know anything about Herman the German. But I love it. It's saying in your Canadian voice.
Yeah.
And also, the fact that they want to come through with messages.
Yeah.
And it was quite touching, the fact that we were having dinner together.
Yeah.
Not candlelit, I might add.
Yeah, well, next
It
time.
wasn't a romantic one.
Was there any bolly
work on it.
involved?
No, I wish there was.
There should have been.
Yeah. What did we have? We did have a nice wine,
We
though.
did. It was recommended. It was beautiful.
Yeah, we
Please,
did.
can we get back on the topic?
Oh, goodness me. So, life after death. For my own experience, I know some people, some organisation call them guides or spirits or whatever, but my father and my grandmother, Nana, and my granddad are with me every day. Sometimes they wait on the bed when I wake up in the morning, and sometimes, they're there when I go to sleep. I hear my dad a lot, but my dad died when I was 9, and my mum died when I was 12.
Mm.
So I had very little contact with any family members other than my siblings, and it was something I really wanted. I wanted to get in touch with them, and I didn't know how, but I managed to find my parental grandparents and heard a lot about my dad. And funny enough, when she showed me pictures of him, I realised that was who was sitting on my shoulder all that time.
Wow.
And this is a funny story because they're Liverpudlians and they've got some really good sense of humour. And I was thinking one day, it was years ago, whether when I was first venturing out to offer my mediumship services, and I was doing some platform work, and I wasn't sure what to put on my card. Like somebody had suggested a catchphrase or some sort of marketing little sentence.
Ploy.
Yeah, that's it, thank you. And I was just sitting there thinking, and my granddad came through and he said, I've got it, Ronnie. I know what you should say. And I said, I think it better be good. He said, why don't you put Ronnie Mae James, spiritual medium, your loss is my gain. I said, Grandad, I can't do that. I can't
Clearly
put that.
has a sense of humour.
I can't put that. And they were just laughing. That's all they were doing was that. I said, stop it. But yeah. So from my
But where? But is there? I mean, there's heaven and fluffy clouds and pearly gates and St. Peter and with the big book, and it must be very busy in this. Is it? What is this place?
Well, I think.
Is it a parallel universe?
It's another dimension.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
the way it's always been described to me, and it's really it is part of the physical world, but it's like a step up, if you like, from where we are now.
Yeah, and it's
not as far away as you think.
It's funny. We did talk about that the veil, and
Yes.
that's the thinnest. The Halloween is the thinnest veil of the year when the spirits can cross over. But when people die, there is actually like a glass wall between you and them, except there are people who can't see their loved ones. They might see, they might smell or hear, and have a sense of them, like you have a sense of like Claire essence. They might smell their perfume or smell the tobacco that Dad used to smoke, all that kind of stuff. But when they die, essentially they go to a place where it's a bit like a recuperation. It's a time of rest. In spiritual terms, time has no meaning, no essence at all. 2 years to us is a long time, but it could take up to 10 years, 20 years to right themselves before they go to the sacred place, which we all know as heaven.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk too much about what actually happens in heaven, because it is very much related to the soul and what the soul does when it comes back into the next life. So we need to talk about that in another episode.
Yeah.
But
is there a counterpoint? I mean, the convention allows for a heaven as a good place and hell as a bad place.
Yeah.
Is there a spiritual parking lot for bad people?
Well, apparently, yes. So there is the work of a number of hypnotherapists who have done. They've done a lot of past life regression.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll let Claudia talk about her interest, because there's a few people that we have both read, and she's very good at telling this story. But the one that I remember very much is the story of Dr. Brian Weiss, who's you can see on YouTube, and he has hypnotised that many people and interviewed that many people that have had life, what do they call it, near-death experiences. Yeah. And there was one young man who said that he experienced hell. To him it was a living hell. It was hot. There was nothing that grew. There was no wind. There was this constant howling and ear-piercing noise that was relentless, that hurt his head the whole time he was there. And he believes that was an experience to show him there is a hell. But we don't want to focus on the hell. We want to focus on self-development and getting into the heavens. But Claudia, talk about our interests, educate, and
yes. Well, one of my absolute favourite authors, which I'm sure quite a few of you out there have heard of, is Edgar Cayce, he was known as the sleeping prophet. And Edgar learned from a very young age that he had a special gift, that when he would go into a meditative state, that he was able to tap into what's called the Akashic records. He's actually the father of homeopathic medicine, because he was able to come up with cures for all ailments, and people would come to him from literally all over the world. This is back last century. When they couldn't find a cure for whatever was ailing them, they would come to Edgar, and he would go into his sleeping state, and he would access the Akashic records, and he would find cures, because through the spiritual essence he would be able to, I guess, look into the body of the patient and see what was actually wrong with him, what was causing the problem, and he would provide natural cures through things that are provided in nature. And he had an uncanny success rate with healing people. So his journey in relation to what he did when he was in the physical world was also telling. When he would access the Akashic records, he would also be able to describe what we would call heaven or the spirit world was like. And his version is there are different levels of heaven. So depending on the life that you lived, there are different levels of access that you would get to. So obviously someone who was a nasty person, like Hitler, for example, obviously once he had crossed over, he'd be pulled off to the side. No access for you. You're coming over here because you need to be reprogrammed. But then, and he actually said in one of his visions that he saw before him the different levels of heaven. He says there's 9, and depending, again, as I said, depending on the sort of person that you were and the life that you lived, you would have access to these various levels. Someone obviously like Gandhi or the Dalai Lama obviously would go a little bit higher, or
didn't he have a connection also with sort of like the very early beliefs, and he was quite instrumental to the early hypnosis? Did he have he had a connection with that as well?
He